Senator Debicella.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to join Senator Harp and Senator Daly in thanking all of the staff members who have put in a tremendous amount of time throughout this budget process and likely will continuing on into the summer. And I want to thank Senator Harp in particular. She has been a pleasure to work with. We don't always agree on everything, but she is an intelligent woman who fights fiercely for her beliefs, and it's been a real joy working with her. I also agree that the Appropriations Committee does work a heck of a lot harder than the Finance Committee, with all due respect to my good friends. But unfortunately, Mr. President, the product before us today is not the right budget for the state of Connecticut. It is an attack on the middle class through the largest tax increase in Connecticut history. And my friends on the other side of the aisle have gone around and like to say that this is a tax increase on the rich. And unfortunately, the details that were just laid out show that this is not true. And the average family in Connecticut will pay $500 to $1,000 more a year in taxes under this budget. Let me explain that a little bit before talking a little bit about the spending side. It is true there is an income tax hike on people making more than $500,000. Well, that's obviously a tax on the rich. But then if you look through this, you have taxes that squarely hit the middle class. Take the cigarette tax, an increase of 75 cents a pack. Now, it's true that not everybody smokes. But if you do have someone in your family who smokes, one pack a day, that's $300. And if you have the very unhealthy habit of 2 packs a day, that's $600. Now again, not everybody has someone who smokes in your family. But maybe you have somebody who buys products. Because this budget raises taxes on businesses by 30%. And when a tax is raised on business, they don't just create that money out of air. There's only 3 places they can get it. They can lower their costs, mostly through getting rid of workers. They can lower their profits, or they can raise their prices. Well, guess what? Some businesses are going to do each of those 3. But there will be some businesses that pass that along to consumers in the form of higher prices. And with a tax of this magnitude, that's to the tune of hundreds of dollars a year. So even if the middle class isn't paying the tax to the government, they're the ones paying the corporate tax through higher prices. You look at the income tax, and yes, there'll be some wealthy folks who make $500,000 a year who'll be paying more. But small business people also get taxed through the income tax. They don't pay the corporate tax. The small guy has all of their business flow through their personal income tax. So for them, the small businessmen who are going to lead us out of this recession, we are adding on 2.5% in taxes. Take the estate tax. You're unlucky enough to pass away and you have a house in Fairfield County, we're raising your taxes too. And again, it's a couple $100s a year here, a couple $100s a year there, and it's not going to impact everybody. But one of these taxes hits every middle class family in Connecticut. And it strikes me, Mr. President, as odd, given that Democrats around the country are saying the opposite. President Obama has said raising taxes in a recession is the wrong thing to do. One of our neighbors to the north, Maine, with a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, passed a tax cut because, as the governor said, we won't have employees unless we have employers in our state. Why are we taking the opposite from what the National Democratic Party and Democrats in other states are saying? Unfortunately, Mr. President, the reason is because we haven't made real cuts in this budget. And this budget represents a lost opportunity, an opportunity to reinvent how government actually works. If you look at the cuts that are in this budget, there are basically 3 kinds of cuts that total over $1 billion. First is reductions in employee costs due to the deal that we made with our unions and the early retirement package, which is coming in better than expected. The second is a roll forward of the governor's rescissions. So if you look at the incremental cuts that are in this budget, above and beyond what the Appropriations Committee approved, they are all things that the governor did in 2009, so they've already been cut. This budget simply rolls them forward. And third, Mr. President, unfortunately, we have a lot of the gimmicks that were in the Appropriations Committee budget and continue in here, including delaying capitation payments for $65 million, making assumptions around self-insurance and the reduction, or I should say the delaying claims that we're going to have. But it includes new things as well. So it includes $102 million for the sale of assets. Now, the sale of assets is a good idea. Unfortunately, the bill doesn't say what assets we're going to sell. Much like the $220 million that we were going to find, that turned out to be less than half of that, the bill says we're going to find $100 million in assets that we're going to sell, without specifying it. So not a bad idea, but without specifics, it's just a gimmick. The bottom line here, Mr. President, is we have a budget before us that doesn't make the hard choices, and unfortunately tries to sneak in a bunch of things as well. And I'll ask some questions about some of the, in good old legislative parlance, rats that are in this bill in a second. But the bottom line is I'm going to encourage my colleagues to vote no on this today and for us to resume real budget negotiations. And my plea is to the moderates in the circle, because it is the moderates in the circle who can make a no tax increase budget possible. The only way this is going to happen at the end of the day is on a bipartisan basis. And it's up to moderates in both parties to reach out to our leadership and reach across the aisle to try to come up with a budget that does not add $500 to $1,000 in taxes to middle-class families.